best thing I can say about the new Superman is that in some ways it evokes the same feelings I had watching the Raimi Spider-Man films. I know they're not exactly the same, especially because this film is a lot more crowded with other superpowered beings, but there is one extremely important trait they share. The fact that we see Superman saving civilians, and spend a little bit of time with those civilians, seeing their reactions and emotions and small interactions with Superman, is the missing piece. That, I think, is a huge part of what makes this film feel so hopeful, along with how honestly it presents itself as a comic book movie. It's pretty wacky right off the bat. This film also works so well specifically because of the current superhero cinema landscape. The action is incredibly stylized, though not to the degree of Spider-Man 2's train fight, for example, but it has its moments. Most of this review will contain spoilers, so if you have not seen the film yet, I would encourage you to go watch it. Now let's talk about this, including a lot of spoilers. To get my biggest issue out of the way, I was not a fan of the change to his Kryptonian parents. If they wanted this to be a fresh start, not just for the DCU, but for Superman films, I believe the crew did a great job on most of it, but I still think they should have kept Kal-El's parents as good people at their core. At the start of the movie, he's listening to a broken message that sounds purely good at first. I was hoping that either leave it that way or expose that Luthor engineered the part about conquering Earth, but unfortunately they did not. And in this current landscape, it just feels sort of derivative of something like Invincible, to be honest. Superman is supposed to be the blueprint, even for Invincible. He's the original, the all-good Boy Scout. I do have a more forgiving interpretation of this writing choice, though. I think it's made to really hammer home an important piece of Superman's character, that being the Kents, the kindly couple who adopted him, and his own inner good, being what made him interpret the message that way in the first place. Like in a conversation with Pa Kent, which is also one of the best parts of the film, they basically say this to your face. I also love the fight scenes. Going back to me calling this film stylized, they were like the original Spider-Man films with saving civilians and showing us incredibly dynamic camera movement. Keep in mind, of course, it's still not as stylized as something like the train fight from Spider-Man 2, but my point is that it has those same traits, and that's a huge plus for this movie. I said this in a post, but I'll say it again here. The good luck with that fight scene, where he flies up and does a spin into heat vision, is keynote. Specifically with how it shows the Superman symbol into the camera and the music swells that moment, it just made me think this is what Superman is supposed to be. The S on his chest means he's gonna win and everything's gonna be fine. Plus, I did love how the soundtrack matched this, and the soundtrack in the movie as a whole is just great. It takes the original Superman theme and the Man of Steel theme and combines the best of both worlds. So you have the guitar and the percussion that ramps up, along with the overall melody being from the 70s movies. In general, the fight scenes here feel really smooth. I like that there's no real break between the plot and the fights. They're all there to serve the plot for Superman to reach his goal. He gets into fights for the sake of the movie happening. Every single conflict you see on screen has a reason in the grander sort of conflict between Luthor and Superman. They just happen, and they don't slow the pacing of the movie down at all. The fact that he needs help and gets kicked around a lot didn't bother me as much, especially considering who he was getting beaten up by. Spoilers again, but Ultraman in this movie is an empty clone of him. So he was fighting himself at full power. That's sort of the only real challenge he has. The fight with Lex Luthor's soldiers, the Raptors, keep in mind they are super soldiers, that is a glimpse at his full power compared to the best humans. They couldn't touch him at all. I hope in the next movie we do get more of him sort of walking through bullets and stuff like that. I also like the flying. The Snyder version of flight had its own appeal, displaying how powerful he is, how much force he generates when he kicks off the ground, and how he broke the sound barrier. This version, I think, focuses more on speed, and the camera placement here shows us how fast he can move in a very different way. We follow him. It was interesting how when he moved from Metropolis to the Fortress of Solitude, you just see his face or torso, and in a second or two, he gets covered in ice. It's an interesting way of showing him how it takes no time at all for him, and us with him, to cross the Earth. Speaking of flight, let's talk about the second point that I really liked. The title. I was still pretty suspicious of this movie at the beginning, but once he blasted off back to Metropolis after healing, and they zoom into the S symbol and it starts glowing, turning into that zooming text from the original Christopher Reeve film, it sort of changed my mind, at least a little bit. That stylization was a sign to me that they were going all in on the camp, which is exactly what I wanted from a Superman film. Even before he flies off, right after healing, he says something like, "Gee golly," or something. He's cheesy. There is some James Gunn humor, and there are some downsides to that, which I'll get into, but thankfully it doesn't overstay its welcome, except for one scene. People might have issues with how explicitly he and Luthor talk to each other throughout the movie, but it's really not that bad. With that, let's talk about the third point I loved, and what I think is the most sincere moment of Superman 2025, the final monologue. This specific scene was what made me understand Superman as a character. He's a god who believes that being a man is a wonderful thing, if not a better state of being than being a god. He's so much stronger than everyone around him, but he wants to be just like us. He sees the good in people, even those who hate him, like Lex Luthor. And the reason he can afford to do this, to keep appealing to people's humanity, is because he has this godlike power. It's specifically because you can't keep him down, you can't hurt him, that he's able to speak like this. He'll keep coming back to try and convince you to understand the good in people and yourself. That's the benefit of all of his powers. To argue with Zack Snyder's rendition of Luthor, yes, absolute power corrupts absolutely, but Superman is written to be strong enough to withstand and even surpass his own power's corrupting nature. I'm very glad that they made that part explicit. I'm glad that they say it to your face, where being human is his greatest strength. The monologue is fantastic, but I did hate how they ended it. I hate that they did the Avengers 1 thing where Krypto shows up and throws Lex around. The momentum it had going was just thrown out of a window. I still think the only time that this whole deal worked was in Avengers 1. They had one shot with Hulk and Loki, they used it, ever since then it's been overdone. You know, a better way, in my opinion, would be let Lex finish his side of things, wait a second, have the music stop, and then you can have whatever humor you want. You can't just keep doing this like, oh haha, the dog's here. If you wanted this movie to be sincere, then keep it sincere. This is what's keeping it down, I think, from really being a fantastic movie. They still have these modern superhero tongue-in-cheek things, or like, haha, don't take it too seriously. I don't like that, you know? So those are points, you know, for the Raimi films. They still surpass this in pure sincerity. But the reason I like this movie is because it's getting there. At least it's getting there a lot more than recent superhero films. If you feel like the genre has gotten tired, I'd still encourage you to watch this movie. You might love it. In moments of real triumph, this is something I really loved. In moments of real triumph, they don't just play their new Superman theme, they play a chunk of the original. The one scene that I can remember is when he escapes the black hole. That's one time where the main theme is played in full. They don't use the new one, but they use the classic Reeve one. Seriously, even if you are a fan of Cavill's Superman, I would still say watch this movie. Speaking of, I will briefly talk about Man of Steel and the Snyder movies. I'm not going to say I hated them. I saw Man of Steel in cinemas when I was younger, but it did not evoke the same strong feelings that it did here. The one scene that did was First Flight. That was pure Superman. That was Superman-esque. But what James Gunn's Superman gets, and what superhero films as a whole should understand way more, is to focus on making the world that these heroes live in feel alive. That's what Sam Raimi did with the Spider-Man films. That's what makes Spider-Man 2 one of the greatest superhero movies, if not pieces of superhero media, of all time. It's why Tobey Maguire stays the best Spider-Man in a lot of people's minds. You could see yourself as a normal person in these civilians, put yourself in their shoes, interacting with these heroes. Superman is not just supposed to be hype moments and aura. I'd argue that's actually Batman's territory. Speaking of, I'm somewhat excited for Brave and the Bold, but I am only going to be cautiously optimistic here. Again, the superhero landscape is bloated, they might get it wrong. Don't fully commit just yet. I will say, since the film is called Brave and the Bold, there are two things I want to see. One, the Brave and the Bold cartoon suit, or at least some version of the blue and gray suit. I love that suit. And if we're going for a more fantastical version than, say, Matt Reeves' version, they should really make it colorful. My second wish for Brave and the Bold is mentioning Tibetan monks somewhere in there. The superhero cinema landscape has really changed. Everyone wants their own cinematic universe, and you could argue that it works against this movie. They didn't give Superman his own solo-focused film. It is way more efficient to start a cinematic universe with how James Gunn did it here, yes. But in a different world, I would have liked a pure Superman film again in the modern day. But yeah, these were basically my sort of thoughts on this movie. I did love it for what it was. I did. I thought it had a lot of things that other superhero stuff has been missing. It is proof that the genre isn't falling apart as much as people might think. It's just been done wrong. As long as you present these superheroes as heroes, that's getting it right. That's what being a hero is supposed to be. You don't just look out for personal friends and family. Being a superhero means you look out for all forms of life, big and small. Like the squirrel save, that's Superman to his core. So those are my thoughts on this film. I think that the DCU has somewhat of a bright future if they keep this up. If they can keep the tone, if they can keep their understanding of the sort of genre as a whole, I think they've got this in the bag. And dare I say it, this might become the new MCU in its prime, if that makes sense. If they plan this correctly, we might get a second run of the Infinity Saga all over again. So yeah, this film was bright, it was colorful, it was campy, it inspires hope in people, and that's what a superhero is supposed to do. So let me know what you guys thought of this movie in the comments below, what you liked, what you didn't like, what are your hopes for the future of the DCU, and yeah, that's all. See you guys next time.